Today is the end of an era. AnandTech is shutting down. So for those of you who don't know my background, after years and years of study, I went to go work as a journalist, as a hardware reviewer at the website AnandTech under the founder Anand Shimpi. He started the website in 1997 as a young, bright-eyed 14-year-old, and since then it has spent 27 years at the top of its game, reporting on the latest technology in the depth and detail we as engineers love. So I had the opportunity of working with them from around, I want to say 2010, 2011. I started around the Sandy Bridge launch, was my first review, sort of like a P67 ASRock Extreme 4, I think. A board I would have given a silver award to if I'd actually had more experience dealing with motherboards. It was quite good. However, over the years, the website has had booms and busts, obviously, with this industry. During the dot-com era, it sailed through along with websites like Ace's Hardware, Tom's Hardware, Sharky's Hardware, and it stood for a long while at the top of that list in terms of technical detail and content. One of the key elements of the website was its professionalism in this industry. Every event, we would always wear suits, not just hoodies and t-shirts and jeans like all the others. That actually emanates from a funny story about how when the site first started and when we had 20 motherboard vendors and they'd all appear at Anand's house to show them the wares, and he'd have to go to events, and because he was 15 he needed a chaperone, so his mother joined him. But in order to be taken seriously as a 15-year-old in the industry, he wore a suit. And that kind of has stayed through from then to now. I mostly adhere to that still. It depends how comfortable I am and how many shirts I have left in the hotel at the end of the week and how many I still need. But it's an example of media that doesn't exist anymore. And unfortunately to say, AnandTech will not exist. This video should be going live on the last Friday in August, which should be technically the last day where AnandTech has employees. I left 2.5 years ago. I spent best part of 11, 12 years there. And I still keep in touch with the people who are there. Ryan Smith, editor-in-chief, Gavin Bonshaw, senior motherboard editor, and a few of the others that do the sort of one article a month sort of thing. And I was informed last week privately that the website was given 2 weeks notice to shut down. That's 27 years cancelled in 2 weeks. For those of you who are wondering about what's going to happen, information is a bit unclear, perhaps because I'm not so close to the fold. I believe there will be a message on the AnandTech website explaining the closure. If not, it will probably be in the forum, and by the time this video goes out, there will probably be a lot of articles about it already. The website itself, the hosting, is paid up for another few months. Whether that means the content will stay there, we're not sure. And to give you a bit of context on all of this, Anand left the website. He sold it technically. He did a "I'm retiring at 32" post, which was code for "I'm going to work at Apple." So essentially retired. He was 32. That was 2014, 2015, and at the time, as I remember correctly, he was looking to sell the website. His whole thing was, okay, I've done travel, immense travel, made a bit of money in that time. I'd done it for so many years, had made strong partnerships. Now I've got this opportunity at Apple. Let's fully disconnect and sell it. So it was funny. He did sell it. I think officially around this time frame of that year, and he reached out to some of the editors. At that time I was senior editor for motherboards, and I'd been doing CPUs for about a year at that time. And he said, he pinged me and said, I'm retiring and I've sold the site. And I joked. I said to him, haha, don't tell me you've sold it to the same publisher that owns Tom's Hardware. To which the response was he had. Tom's Hardware had been sold a few years prior to a publisher called Perch, as in purchase. That company was a mixture of B2B, B2B, B2C assets. Anand sold the site, though officially stayed on as some sort of advisor for 6 to 12 months. Again, wasn't completely clear. And he named Ryan Smith, the GPU editor at the time, senior GPU editor, as the editor-in-chief. But the idea was that everybody was going to kind of move over. At that time, AnandTech didn't really have full-time employees. Everybody was a freelancer of sorts. Ryan included, me, Jared, I think was Christian part of the website then, Ganesh, and so it all transferred over to Perch. And unbeknownst to me at the time, due to logistic issues and me being the only editor in the UK, the website was not technically given its own place among the hierarchy of the brands of Perch. Due to Ryan being new as editor-in-chief and no experience in that role, they put AnandTech technically under the supervision of Tom's Hardware. So the hierarchy was that AnandTech was unofficially a brand of Tom's Hardware at the time. But at the time it was Fritz Nelson was the editor-in-chief of Tom's. He was an amazingly fun guy to work with, very receptive, always took the time to hear a lot of my complaining that was going on. I always had plenty of ideas for the website on how to build it, how to improve it, how to find more. Though under the new owners, there was not an immediate change in the way we approach content, but there was a distinct push to how some of that content was monetized. It was around that time we started putting affiliate links in our articles, because obviously for that type of media, there's two main revenue sources, 2, 3. There's obviously the advertising that gets sold on the site. There's the affiliate link sales. So we review an Intel CPU, and here's the link to go buy the Intel CPU. The third one is sponsored content, though at AnandTech we tried to avoid it at the time. And it meant that there was a push to refocus the content on not only the key areas that the website was known for, but also to push it down, a more consumer-focused, affiliate sale-driven, Google traffic-driven audience. And for those of you who have read or watched my content for the last decade, will know that AnandTech wasn't just about what was in the market. It was about new ideas in research, new functions, new features, not stuff that was monetizable to the same degree. For those that you who know me better, I always like going to the IEEE conferences, dealing in the latest research, learning about why my smartphone is using 12 transistor L1 cache rather than 8 or 6. Not something that's going to convince my grandma to buy a new smartphone, but interesting to me and interesting to the engineers that read AnandTech. So there was a push to refocus the site and monetize the site more effectively. However, AnandTech kind of stood alone in that business as one of the few domain matter experts under the Perch brand. We're talking things like Tech Radar, Game Radar, Laptop Mag. Those are more sort of generalist technology outlets, whereas Tom's Hardware as well as AnandTech, even though Tom's Hardware had a more consumer focus as well. So things like they pushed us to do fewer keyboards and SSDs and stuff, without noticing the reality that the people that AnandTech had on freelance, the only reason the keyboard editor was doing keyboards is because that was what he liked to do. If he wasn't able to do keyboards anymore, then he would just go write for somebody else. So he managed to return them on that front. And then, as tech media goes on, there are cycles, right? People come in, people go out. And AnandTech had very few people coming in. Over time, it was mostly people going out, and I think a lot of you who read the site at the time saw this as the reduction in content. However, a couple of years later, Perch itself was acquired by a larger media organization called Future PLC, one of the biggest publishers in the UK, now with a strong US presence, new leadership, new management, a lot of corporate stuff. And those of you, again, who know me, I'm not necessarily a fan of the whole corporate hierarchy. I like having a voice up and down the chain. So yeah, there was added levels of management. I'd been full time, I think, for about 2 or 3 years at that point. So being actually employed by the the UK headquarters for a time, that actually helped. Having access to more people my side of the pond to share my gripes and suggestions with. But again, over time, push to more consumer grade content. What used to be sort of like an unlimited travel budget became a very fixed travel budget, restricted on where exactly we could go. I still argue to my case, as always, to go to these technical conferences. And then, over time, we just lost too many people, not enough being replaced. And then, pandemic hit. That's when I started this channel. Not because of the pandemic, I had actually been thinking about it for quite a while. And then towards the end of the pandemic, we lost a couple of key people in 1 year, including Andre, senior smartphone editor, which I'm sure most of you know. And that was kind of, death knell for me. I at that point, I did want out. I'm not sure if Ryan realized it at the time, just how stressful it had been trying to keep some of these relationships alive with the storage companies, with the smartphone companies, with the motherboard companies, all the aspects of this industry that I cared about, and all the contacts that I had built over the years that I kind of passed off onto other editors were coming back to me, and it became very overwhelming, and to the point where a number of people in the industry thought I was the editor-in-chief of AnandTech with just the amount of work I was doing. So I got my safety net. Speaking to a few people in the industry, called it quits, started my own thing, which is kind of what you've been hearing about for a while now, and AnandTech soldiered on, and that was 2.5 years ago. And I think we've all seen the fact that the output has dropped on the site. The amount of quality articles are fewer and further between. One thing I never really liked doing every month was the things like the CPU guide or the motherboard guide, having to check 200 prices on Amazon every week or every month to then tell people this is the best one to buy today. There are millions of people doing that better than me, better than I ever could, who have automated tools to do that. And the other argument is that's the great sort of work for an intern, not a senior editor covering CPUs and a million other things as well. But yeah, the site soldiered on. Ryan and I, always stayed in touch, always bouncing things off each other. One of the good things about being at AnandTech, compared to what I do now, is that I had people like Ryan, people like Gavin there, who I could talk to in depth about what we'd just been briefed on, what the technical aspects were, what the questions are. It's all, to a certain extent, it's that programming rubber duck that you have on your desk that when you've got a problem you speak to. It's Ryan had been that for a few years, so when I left it was weird, but we still kept in touch with things because we were all still in the same briefings. We were all still covering roughly the same content, just now for independent publications, and from me at that point from an analyst perspective as well. And it's I always seeing Ryan and Gavin at events as well every time, and it's fun because I've always respected the team there. They know their stuff. It's all the work that you see me doing now, to help George and Chester over at Chips and Cheese. I know perhaps most of the people here don't know a lot of what I do behind the scenes, but it reminds me of that AnandTech feeling that I had when I was working there, and just the ability to help it in the way that I've been able to. But now, it's got to the point where the content is so few. So many of you who I meet in person tell me, oh, I used to visit AnandTech, on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. That, became a monthly basis, then a never at all. And given a lot of attitude towards, the publisher, what they were doing to Tom's Hardware and what they were doing to other brands, the simplification of the content on those sites was something I know a lot of the engineering community just really were getting annoyed at. It's unfortunately from the publisher's perspective, it just wasn't a sustainable market to go down. Whereas the chasing the Google search and the Google revenue and the affiliate revenue was the only way to keep it alive. I've been saying for a while now, if there's one thing a publisher's willing to do is they're willing to pay less. And unfortunately, if you looked at how much they were paying freelancers, it seemed to just get worse over time. And I've heard that from other brands at that publisher as well. They're struggling to get freelancers to join in. It's tough. Written media is a tough market these days, incredibly so. One of the reasons why I started the YouTube channel was because I kept requesting internally, let's do video. Video is going to be the future of this. Do we have any resources? At the time I worked for that publisher had video content from other brands, but there was just no synergy to be able to bring it together for other brands to use, studios, cameras, editors, that sort of thing. So it was a case of, if you want to do it, you've got to do it yourself. And so I said, well, if I'm going to do it myself, I'm going to do it under my own branding. I'm going to do it, with my own equity. And funnily enough, a few months later, I was asked to bring it under the brand, and I told them to go take a long jump off a short pier at that point. I guess in retrospect, that's a little bit of the start of the end. But yeah, Ryan and Gavin. So Ryan and Gavin will obviously continue as anybody does when a company, a brand disintegrates. I'm going to be seeing Gavin in a couple of weeks, or actually, as this is going out, probably next week, at IFA in Berlin. He was invited by a couple of companies to go out. And even with this, AnandTech shutting down, they're still inviting him out because they're going to have a chat. I expect if he can find a job in the industry, either writing or working for a company, that would be great. Ryan's history is GPUs. I was always wondered why he had never been hired by NVIDIA at any point during his career. I'm pretty sure they offered him at least once or twice over the years. But I do know that for him, being editor-in-chief at AnandTech, even through the publishers, and I know a lot of you criticize the fact that he didn't write as often as he used to. It turns out when you're in corporate world, corporate things get in the corporate way. And the corporate can go shove it up their corporate whatevers. But he was always behind the scenes, and I fully expect he could go back into that GPU editor, going to the GPU segment role at any of the companies immediately after this. Now he's a full-time employee, so he'll get the full-time employee benefits of being let go. But and all the companies that we work with already know that this is happening. They've been given anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks notice that this is going on. So I've no doubt that a few people are already in touch with him. Everybody else is going to land on their feet. All the other freelancers all had full-time jobs, either industry or industry adjacent anyway. I already know of one publication that kind of wants to have Ganesh do his 1 or 2 reviews a month in the storage and mini PC market. So that'll be great for him. I should actually have a chat with him. I haven't spoken to him for a while. But the rest of us who left early, it's I hate saying I told you so. I did have a meeting with Ryan before I left. Before I told him I was planning to leave, actually. He doesn't know this, but I'd already decided in my head that I was leaving. But we had dinner, actually, in Oregon, where he lives. I did think we were going to get thrown out the restaurant because I was shouting at him quite hard. But I was kind of frustrated with the direction the website was going at the time. There's just limited growth, limited opportunities, fewer people, more stress, more angst. I don't think that ever got better after I left. Very clear that between Ryan and Gavin, the pressure was on, or they were feeling it. I just always wish, and I told Ryan this at the time, I always wish I knew more about the corporate structure internally. He did his best. It's a managerial technique of keeping the day-to-day humdrum of corporate life away from the employees actually doing the deep technical work. I always wished I knew more what was going on or had the opportunity to affect what was going on. Unfortunately, that corporate structure of AnandTech being under Tom's Hardware, even though it was designed to be temporary, never really changed. It was always very difficult when I was there, to talk about AnandTech in an independent light outside of Tom's Hardware, because people very often saw them, almost as one and the same thing. It also meant that some of the more difficult minutiae about where funding was allocated and who it was allocated to. I remember during the pandemic, budgets were cut because everybody was expected to, traffic was expected to go down, and then we had a massive boost, and then funding got returned. But funding was returned to, as I understand it, Tom's Hardware first, because they were in charge of our budget, which meant you saw a lot of the freelance editors we almost had to let go, or we did let go. People like Anton went and had to find other work. And then as budgets came back, you reach out back to the freelancers you used to have, and it's like, no, I've found something else. I've had to take a full-time job somewhere else, or I had to go do this, that, and the other. So it was really hard to recoup a lot of that after that happened. And again, I found my creative outlet in video, and it's been a struggle. I always say that my two main issues as a journalist were video and audio, and as a written journalist, that was fine. Now I'm in front of you guys on YouTube. It's a bit more difficult, but we'll get there. It's I'm not sure what else to say on the fact that AnandTech's closing. We do not know. It's not been clear whether there'll be a post on the website on Friday, or whether there'll be something in the forum. I could have arguably spoken about this last week, but out of respect for Ryan and Gavin and the other people there, I honour the request to keep this until the official day. The content, we don't know. Hosting is technically valid for a few more months. I think it's April. I've asked the guys at Chips and Cheese to archive what's on AnandTech, though that being said, the copyright is still with the publisher, so no indication of whether that's going to be reposted anywhere or not, or if it's going to stay up beyond April. I'm of the opinion, or of the understanding, that the forums will stick around. Traffic to the forums was decreasing while I was there. The thing is, that requires very little management, and the community manager for Tom's can also be the community manager for AnandTech. So that may stick around for a longer while, though or be merged in with Tom's Hardware. I don't know. It's from the point of the publisher, it does simplify things. AnandTech had been losing money for a while. I'm pretty sure while I was there, traffic was not big enough to sustain both Ryan, and Gavin, and the freelancers to keep going. Just because it's algorithmically, you got to keep posting to stay alive. It's the old adage, publish or perish. I tried to publish and left, and now it's perishing. So a lot of people that I've spoken to about this, either other companies or people I trust, the face they give me when I tell them AnandTech's closing down is one of shock. They all say, "Oh, I used to visit there every day." Well, it's because you stopped visiting. It's closing, and that's not your fault though. The content output should have been kept. Should have, the ethos of being very important, highly detailed engineers type of engineering website, got lost because people didn't understand the vision. I could name names. I'm not going to. it is what it is. This is the world we live in now. Video seems to be where it's at. This is where I'm playing now for part of my time, and I'm respecting the people that do. But yeah, for everyone else, if you really liked what AnandTech did on the details side, I can highly recommend going to read the guys over at chipsandcheese.com. I do a podcast here on the channel with George, the editor-in-chief there, and there's a reason I do. The guys there are very smart. They know what they're doing. I've been helping them getting the contacts in the industry, and they also want to keep that level of detail alive. I think it's worth keeping alive. We just need to find a business model for chips and cheese that actually works and sustains at the bare minimum, George and the editors that write. And so we're working on that now, and you'll find out both here and over at Chips and Cheese how that goes. Yeah, end of an era. I knew it was going to happen, just didn't know when, and a lot of people told me that. It's happening.